My name is Monique Carver, 35 years old. The phone rang in the middle of my workday, slicing through the quiet hum of the office like a blade. Mom's name lit up the screen. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Her calls usually meant one of two things: another forgotten password I needed to reset for her, or another fundraiser where she assumed I'd contribute double what anyone else did. But something inside me nudged. Habit, guilt, or that old reflex that family summons aren't really optional. I answered. Her voice was brisk, almost cheerful. "Monique, you'll need to come and collect Ruby. She got sick in the car. We've left her by a safe spot on the road." The pen in my hand rolled from my fingers and clattered onto the desk. My pulse surged. "I'm sorry. What?" "She was ill," Mom said, her tone flat, like she was reporting the weather. "We couldn't risk the other kids catching it. And we've got a flight. We couldn't wait. You can be there quickly. It's close. Maybe 15 minutes from you." A laugh that wasn't a laugh escaped me, thin and horrified. "You left my daughter on the road?" "She's fine," Mom clipped back, as if my disbelief was the problem. From the background, Dad's voice chimed in, muffled but firm. "Don't overreact. We dropped her where there are people around." Overreact. As if abandoning an 8-year-old by the roadside was a minor logistical adjustment, like misplacing luggage. "Send me the location. Now," I said, my voice strangled and shaking. The pin arrived seconds later. The call ended, just like that. I was already on my feet, grabbing my keys, heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. The elevator ride down felt eternal, the parking lot a blur. By the time I hit the freeway, my grip on the wheel was white-knuckled, my breath shallow. Traffic dragged, every red brake light ahead of me a personal affront. I slammed my hand against the steering wheel, once, twice, fury and fear crashing together. "She's fine. Don't overreact." The words kept circling, poisonous and familiar. That was their gift, dressing cruelty up as practicality until you started questioning your own outrage. By the time I pulled up to the pin location, my chest ached from holding my breath. My eyes scanned the stretch of asphalt, the skeletal trees bending in the wind, the wide nothing of the roadside, and then I saw her. Ruby! My little girl stood alone, backpack clutched to her chest like a shield, her knees turned inward, her eyes red and swollen from crying. The road around her was desolate, empty in both directions. No people around, no safety. Just my child, small against the void. When she spotted my car, her face crumpled. She broke into a run, stumbling on the gravel, nearly tripping before reaching me. I barely had time to open the door before she collapsed into my arms. "Mom!" Her whole body shook, hot tears soaking into my shirt. "I'm here. You're safe now," I whispered, holding her as tightly as I could, as if I could fuse her trembling body back into steadiness. "They said I couldn't come," she hiccuped, her words tangled. "They said I was too sick, but I wasn't. I just got dizzy in the car." I leaned back to see her face, streaked and blotchy, lips quivering. "You got carsick?" She nodded, swallowing hard. That was all. Not the flu, not a stomach virus, nothing contagious, just car sickness. The kind of thing you comfort a child through with water, a cool breeze, a promise of ice cream later. For that, my parents had decided she was disposable. "Listen to me," I said firmly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing. This is not your fault." Her gaze dropped to her hands. "They said I ruined everything." A bitter laugh scraped out of me, too sharp to disguise. "Sweetheart, the only thing ruined here is their credibility as grandparents." A shaky smile tugged at her lips, but the tears kept flowing. I kissed her temple and buckled her into the passenger seat, my hands steady for her sake. Inside, though, the fury was wildfire. As I drove us home, every mile stretched the anger tighter. My parents thought they'd been clever. They thought cruelty dressed as logic would hold up. She was sick. We had to think of the others. We had a flight to catch. But all I could see was my daughter's tiny body on that stretch of empty road. At home, I wrapped Ruby in a blanket, set a cup of water by her side. She clung to me as if afraid I might vanish too. I stroked her hair, my voice calm because she needed it. "You're safe. I've got you. And you will never go through that again." But inside, something had shifted. This wasn't another one of their endless manipulations or casual dismissals. This was the line, and they had crossed it. As Ruby's breathing steadied and her eyes fluttered shut, she whispered, fragile as paper, Are you mad at me?" The words cleaved me open. "No, sweetheart," I said, brushing my thumb across her cheek. "I'm mad at them, and they're about to regret it." Her lashes lowered. Sleep pulled her under, small hands still clutching mine like an anchor. I stared at the ceiling in the dim light, every nerve alive with resolve. My parents thought they understood me, thought they could count on my silence, my compliance, my wallet. They had no idea who they'd just created in that moment. Because when I pulled Ruby off that roadside, I wasn't just rescuing her. I was rescuing myself from decades of their practiced cruelty. If you want to understand why I snapped, you need the whole story. My parents didn't suddenly transform into people who thought abandoning a child was reasonable. That kind of coldness has roots, and I've been tripping over them all my life. I learned long ago that in my family, cruelty always arrives wrapped in practicality, and always comes with a receipt. I grew up as the afterthought. That sounds dramatic, doesn't it? But it wasn't loud or obvious. It was quieter than that, subtle, disguised as practicality, like everything in my family. My brother, 2 years older, was the favorite. Not in a way you could drag into court or pin down in a family therapy session. It was the 1,000 tiny cuts that bleed you dry long before anyone notices. When I was 11, I had my regional school competition, the kind of thing I'd worked toward for months, my poems memorized, my notes bent from use. I circled the date on the kitchen calendar in bright red marker, big enough to fill the square. I reminded them every week. That same week, they booked a family holiday to Florida. Disney, beaches, postcards full of smiles. They went anyway. When they returned 2 weeks later, their suitcases bursting with souvenirs, Mom tilted her head in mock concern. "Oh no, Monique, you must have written it down wrong." I hadn't. They unpacked their souvenirs on the table. Mickey Mouse ears, seashell bracelets, t-shirts that smelled like sunscreen, and their refrain became a chorus. "What a shame you weren't there." Like it had been an accident, like they'd tripped, fallen into a travel agency, and boarded a plane without me. That line haunted me for years. Every time a plan was made when I couldn't go, every time a choice was made without considering me. "What a shame you weren't there," delivered with a smile, dripping with false innocence. I learned early that my presence was optional, but my absence was convenient. So I adapted. If I couldn't be wanted, I'd be indispensable. I became the helper, the one who solved things, who smoothed edges, who made sure everything worked. I buried myself in school, clawed my way into scholarships, worked jobs that left my hands raw and my eyes tired, because independence was the only shield I had. Eventually, I landed in fintech. Spreadsheets and numbers, unglamorous to most, but steady, reliable. Money talks, and in my family, money screamed. It also branded. Comfortable, they called it. That was the code word. Comfortable meant you get the biggest bill. We had this so-called system. Everyone contributes what they can. On paper, it sounded fair. In practice, it was a funnel. If you earned less, you gave less. If you earned more, you gave more, and eventually, more became everything. Family vacations? I'd put in $1,500 to $2,000, while others tossed in $200, maybe $500, if guilt nudged them. The emergency fund, supposedly for crises only, became a bottomless drain. I paid $600 a month into it. My brother, the golden child, $150 when he remembered. Guess whose money covered last spring's mortgage shortfall, or Dad's car insurance, or the new glasses he insisted were necessary to keep working? Spoiler, it wasn't his. And I didn't always know until after it was gone. A text in the group chat. We had to use the fund. Hope that's okay. As if my consent was optional, as if I had a choice. It didn't stop at money. I co-signed their mortgage. I co-signed their car lease, supposedly just helping them get a better rate. But we all knew what it meant. If they slipped, the bank came for me. My credit score wasn't just mine, it was shackled to theirs, chains disguised as family duty. And still I went along with it. Why? Because of Ruby. I wanted her to have what I never had, cousins to grow up with, grandparents to spoil her, holidays that felt like they belonged to everyone, not just the golden child. I thought if I bought in, literally bought in, I could buy her belonging. Looking back now, it's almost laughable. I spent thousands trying to purchase what should have been free. Then came Orlando. This wasn't just any trip. This was the trip, roller coasters, parades, fireworks that painted the sky. Commercials Ruby would sit through with wide eyes, bouncing on the couch, whispering, "When can we go, Mom?" When the invitation came, it was timed, as always, for one of my busiest weeks at work. Part of me wanted to say no. The pattern was too familiar. They would exclude me, then tell Ruby stories about what she'd missed. But when she heard the word Orlando, her face lit up like Christmas morning. So I caved. I told myself they're her grandparents, they'll take care of her. My husband, Mark, couldn't step in, not just because of work, but because spending a week with my family without me made him itch like a rash. So Ruby went without us, her brand new backpack bouncing, her grin stretching ear to ear. And me? I footed the bill. $850 for her airfare, hotel share, and park ticket. Another $2,200 toward group costs, because of course I make more. Total, $2,050. More than double what anyone else contributed. I told myself it was worth it. Ruby's chance to have the trip she'd begged for. But deep down I knew the truth. I'd paid for the privilege of being excluded. Again. The morning they left, Ruby clung to me in the airport drop-off lane, nervous energy fizzing through her. "Mom, you'll come next time, right?" "Of course," I said, even though the lie tasted bitter. I watched her follow my parents toward the gate, her small figure swallowed by the tide of travelers. I told myself she'd be fine, that this time would be different, that money had bought her safety. But money never buys love. It buys obligation. It buys silence. And in my family, it bought the illusion that I was part of something. I can still hear my own thought as I drove away from that airport. What could go wrong? Everything. When I pulled Ruby into my arms on that roadside, trembling and tear-stained, something inside me broke clean in half. One part of me was the daughter who had always bent, always paid, always smoothed things over. The other part, the mother, was done. The first thing I did when Ruby finally drifted off to sleep on the couch that night was open my laptop. The glow of the screen felt like a spotlight, cold and merciless. My hands shook at first, but then steadied as I clicked through each recurring transfer. Cancel. $600 a month to the emergency fund? Gone. Cancel. The family trip contributions, always padded with my extra, erased with one stroke. Then came the bigger shackles, the mortgage, the car lease, those so-called favors I'd done years ago when they claimed they just needed me to co-sign. I called the bank first. The customer service rep spoke in that polite monotone, telling me my removal wouldn't be immediate, that it would trigger a review. That review, I knew, meant one thing. Their sweet little fixed-rate deals were about to unravel. Higher payments, more pressure. The exact squeeze they had always avoided by chaining me to them. For the first time, I felt the chains loosen. Not off yet, but rattling. Next, I pulled up their receipts. Every dollar I'd spent for Ruby's Orlando trip, neat and undeniable. $850 for her airfare, hotel share, and park ticket. $1,200 for the group costs I'd covered because you make more, total $2,050. I wrote the message with a calm clarity that surprised even me. You left Ruby on the side of the road. Return the money I paid for this trip. No flourish, no exclamation points, just facts. I hit send. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Mom's voice, sharp, brittle. "How dare you demand this? She's your daughter. You expect us to pay for her?" I almost laughed. "You mean the daughter you abandoned?" "Yes, I expect repayment." Dad grabbed the phone, his anger blunt and booming. "She was sick. She couldn't go. Why should we pay? You're her mother. You make more money than all of us. And now you want us to pay for your child? What kind of family does that?" There it was. Not anger about leaving Ruby alone. Not shame. Just fury that I dared to send them a bill. "You left her alone," I said flatly. "This isn't optional. You don't just walk away from this." Mom snapped, her words venomous. "You can't just cut us off, Monique." A dry laugh slipped out. "Who says I haven't already?" Silence. For once, they didn't have a script ready. Dad's voice sharpened. "What's that supposed to mean?" I let the silence breathe. Let them feel it. Then the panic began to creep in, his voice lower, less certain. "What about the emergency fund?" "What about it?" I asked. You'll still put money in, right?" "No." A beat of silence. Mom's voice came higher, brittle. "And the trips. You're still covering the trips. You can't just stop paying for family trips." "Watch me." Another pause. I could almost hear them trying to catch up, stumbling to calculate the losses. Dad again. quieter now, almost afraid. The cosigns. You didn't actually touch those, did you? I made some calls. Heavy silence. Then came the ace they always played. Guilt. Dad's voice rose, desperate. You're ungrateful. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. You owe us. I almost smiled. I've been paying that so-called debt my entire adulthood. Thousands into your trips. Hundreds every month into your fund. I co-signed your house, your car. I was your safety net, and now I've cut the cord. Nothing. For once in my life, they had no words. When I set the phone down, my hands weren't trembling. My chest wasn't tight. It felt like putting down a weight I'd carried so long, I'd forgotten how heavy it was. The room was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the faint scratch of Ruby's pencil from the couch. She looked up when I walked back in, her eyes wide. Was that them? She asked softly. Yeah, I said, crouching to meet her gaze. They're not happy. Her small shoulders curled inward. Are they still mad at me? No. My voice was calm, certain. They're mad at me, and that's exactly how it should be. Something in her face softened. A tiny smile, fragile but real, tugged at her mouth. She went back to her drawing, her lines steadier than the night before. I sat beside her, watching the pencil move, and for the first time I realized anger could be a shield, not a weapon. They thought I'd swallow it. They thought I'd keep paying, keep enabling. But they don't do silence. They do theater. And I was about to watch the performance of their lives. I didn't have to wait long. My parents never tolerated silence. It unnerved them. So they did what they always did. They built a stage. The first act unfolded in the family group chat. A neatly worded message from Mom, dripping with practice victimhood. Our daughter Monique is demanding we pay her back over $2,000 for Ruby's trip. Ruby got sick, she couldn't go, and now Monique expects us to cover the entire cost. She makes far more money than we do, but now she's refusing to contribute to the family emergency fund or expenses. Please pray she comes back to her senses. Attached, a cropped screenshot of my message. Just the part where I asked for repayment. Not a single mention of Ruby being left on the side of the road. The replies came fast. A cousin, $2,000. Seriously, Monique? An aunt. You always were dramatic. A church friend. We'll pray for reconciliation. I stared at the screen, a bitter laugh bubbling up. Only my parents could abandon a child on an empty road and still paint me as the monster. I typed slowly, carefully. Ruby wasn't sick. She was carsick. They left her on an empty road, sent me a pin, and drove away. She waited 20 minutes alone until I picked her up. No exclamation marks, no emotion, just facts. The chat split down the middle. Some believed me immediately. This is awful. I believe you, Monique. Others refused. That doesn't sound like your parents. Why would they do that? That doubt sat heavy. Because that's the thing about my parents. They were masters at disguising cruelty as practicality. Then Dad slipped. He couldn't resist hammering out his own reply, probably thinking he was winning the argument. Any rational person would have done it. We had a flight to catch. She was sick. We couldn't risk the other children. We had no choice but to do what we did. I read it 3 times, my stomach flipping, not with fear, but with satisfaction. There it was, a confession dressed up as logic. The chat exploded. You left her? You actually admitted it? Carsick isn't contagious. How could you? Screenshots flew. Neighbors reposted. Even people outside the family thread saw it before my parents realized their mistake and deleted the message. Too late. The internet doesn't forget. By Sunday, the whispers had reached church. I didn't go. I never do. But friends texted me updates. Your mom tried to give a testimony, but they told her it wasn't appropriate. People wouldn't even shake their hands. They walked out before the service ended. Years of polishing their image as pillars of the community undone by one sentence. Any rational person would have done it. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But then came Act 2. A screenshot appeared in the family chat. Proof of a $2,050 transfer back to me. Caption. Even though we already paid for Ruby's place, Monique demanded repayment. Here it is. Proof we paid. For a moment, it worked. An uncle wrote, well, at least they repaid you. That shows good faith. A cousin chimed in. This proves they're trying, Monique. Maybe you should let it go now. I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck. So I pulled out my own stack of receipts. Emergency fund, $600 every month for 5 years. Family trips, $1,500 to $2,000 each time, multiple times. Mortgage cosign, car lease cosign, other little extras that were never little. Total over $40,000 in the last 5 years. I snapped a photo of the pile and posted it with a simple caption. This isn't about one trip. This is about a lifetime of me carrying them. Then I closed my phone. Not to watch the fireworks. I didn't need to. The truth doesn't scream. It just waits. Little pieces of fallout found me anyway. A friend of a friend forwarded a screenshot. They deleted this, but everyone saw it. Someone else mentioned my parents tried to speak at church again, but the room went quiet. A cousin's neighbor wrote me privately. People aren't looking at them the same anymore. I didn't have to chase the story. It spread on its own. That's the thing about reputation. It takes decades to polish and only minutes to crack. And this time, they were the ones holding the hammer. At night, while Ruby sketched quietly beside me, I let myself breathe. She was steadier now, laughing at cartoons, coloring in bold strokes again. But she'd still ask sometimes, soft and uncertain, Mom, did I ruin it for everyone? And I'd answer, calm, steady, unwavering. No, sweetheart, you didn't ruin anything. They did. Each time, she seemed to believe me a little more. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew my parents weren't finished. They'd never been the kind to surrender. They don't do silence. They do theater. And Act 3 was coming. 6 months later, the curtain on Act 3 rose without fanfare. Just the slow, inevitable collapse of everything they had once balanced so carefully. It started with the finances. A cousin mentioned in passing that my parents had lost their fixed rate. Their mortgage spiked almost overnight. The car payment doubled, the lease they once bragged about now an anchor they couldn't pull free from. Without my monthly contributions, the math simply didn't work anymore. Bills piled up. Calls from creditors went unanswered until letters arrived with red stamps across the envelope. Then came the car, repossessed in broad daylight. A tow truck hauled it away while neighbors peeked through their curtains. By the next morning, everyone in town knew. A month later, the for sale sign appeared. On their perfect front lawn, the lawn they had once boasted about hosting Sunday barbecues and Easter egg hunts, they sold the house quickly, but for far less than they wanted. Packed boxes, hurried movers, and a quiet exit with no farewells. Piece by piece, the world they had built crumbled. And socially, they didn't need to be banned. They were simply erased. Invitations stopped coming. Dinners, birthdays, church gatherings, all gone. Friends they had leaned on for decades crossed the street instead of saying hello. Their perfect image, the one they'd burnished for years, had cracked beyond repair. Meanwhile, Ruby was thriving. We finally booked the Orlando trip she had begged for. But this time it was different. This time it was me, Mark, and Ruby together. No compromises, no chains, just us. The morning we arrived, Ruby bounced in her seat, her grin wide enough to split her face. Mom, it's real. It's actually real. Watching her laughter echo across the entrance gates, I thought, every dollar I once wasted on them now builds her joy instead. Her laughter was the sound of freedom, but the real surprise came later. I'd heard whispers early on, relatives hinting that with me gone, my parents leaned harder on my brother. He was the golden child, after all, the one they'd built their world around. Surely he would step in. Surely he would rescue them. But when the requests started, when Mom called him sobbing about bills, when Dad muttered about family duty, he didn't open his wallet. And when the gossip spread, he didn't defend them. Because money wasn't the only problem anymore. They weren't just struggling, they were outcasts, and he wasn't about to tie himself to sinking ships. It wasn't loyalty that guided him, it was self-preservation. So the son they had placed on a pedestal, the one whose childhood had been gilded with every sacrifice I was denied, quietly cut the cord, too. No support, no defense, no visits, nothing. For the first time, they stood truly alone. I imagined the silence of their downsized rental, no neighbors dropping by, no church friends calling, just the echo of their own voices in rooms that once rang with control. Part of me thought they might lash out again, try another performance, but they didn't. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe even they knew the audience was gone. At night, when I tucked Ruby into bed, she sometimes asked, "Do you think Grandma and Grandpa are still mad?" I smoothed her hair back, kissed her forehead, and answered the only way that mattered. "No, sweetheart. If they're mad at anyone, they're mad at me, and that's exactly how it should be." She would nod, reassured, her eyes fluttering shut, and I would sit there in the dark, listening to her steady breathing, knowing that for once, the cycle had stopped with me. But some part of me also knew this wasn't the end. My parents had always been survivors. Manipulators, yes, but survivors. And people like that don't vanish quietly. They bide their time. They wait for a weakness, which meant Act 4 was still possible. And I had to be ready. I thought the silence might last, that maybe, stripped of their audience, my parents would finally stop performing. But silence was never their way. The first sign came in a message late at night, a photo of a cardboard box, taped shut. The caption, sorting through things. Do you want any of your old keepsakes? I stared at it for a long time. Inside that box could have been the doll I once carried everywhere, or the medal from the competition they skipped, or nothing at all, just scraps chosen to tug at me. It didn't matter. I didn't reply. A week later came another message, longer this time. We're sorry if things went too far. We didn't mean to hurt Ruby. We were just trying to keep everyone safe. Family should stick together, Monique. Can't we move past this? An apology laced with accounting. Always just enough softness to sound plausible, just enough excuse to keep themselves blameless. For a moment, I almost let myself picture it. Ruby running into their arms again, holidays without tension, me laying down the armor. But then I remembered her trembling on that roadside, clutching her backpack like a shield. And I remembered my own 11-year-old self waiting in an empty auditorium for parents who never came. I typed my reply carefully. I'm not interested in pretending this never happened. You crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Ruby is safe with me. That's all that matters. I hit send. This time, they didn't answer. Instead, my brother did. Out of nowhere, a call from a number I didn't recognize. His voice was quiet, hesitant. I knew more than I ever said, he admitted after a long pause. About the money. About how they leaned on you. I didn't stop it. Maybe I liked being the favorite too much, but I'm not defending them anymore. It wasn't an apology. Not really, but it was a crack in the golden mask he'd worn his whole life, a seed of something different. Whether it would grow or not wasn't mine to decide. That night, Ruby and I sat at the kitchen table with mugs of cocoa, steam rising between us. Mom, she asked softly, what's family supposed to be? I took a long breath. Family is supposed to be where you're safe, where you're loved no matter what. It's not about money. It's not about pretending. It's about trust. And if people can't give you that, even if they're related by blood, then they're not your family in the way that matters. She nodded slowly, stirring her cocoa. So it's just us? I reached across the table, took her small hand in mine. It's us. And Mark. And the people who show up because they want to, not because they want something. That's family. Her eyes brightened, a fragile kind of relief blooming there. In the weeks that followed, the world adjusted to its new shape. My parents receded, their names spoken less and less. Their absence was louder than any performance they could have staged. And yet the last twist came quietly. Another message. Just a photo this time. No words. An old music box. The one I'd kept on my nightstand as a child. Its lullaby winding soft and slow. The same tune Mom had sung only to my brother, never to me. It sat in their palm, offered back like a peace treaty. Or maybe like bait. I didn't reply. I closed the chat, powered off my phone, and stepped outside where Ruby was laughing with Mark in the yard. The sound was clean, whole, untainted by history. I didn't need the music box. I had a new song now, the kind written in freedom, in laughter, in the steady beat of my daughter's heart against mine. The story wasn't neat. It didn't tie itself into a bow, but maybe that was the point. Some doors stay open, even when you don't walk through them. And for once, I didn't feel the need to decide.